Alabama has a corner who started from day one, already has multiple pick sixes, already plays with rare speed, and still might not be a finished product. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Draft Yoda. We're dad-driven and prospect-focused. Today, we're breaking down Alabama cornerback Zabien Brown. Brown comes in as an 8.96 out of 10 on the Draft Yoda grading scale. Number 50, prospect overall, cornerback number 9 going into the season. Has really interesting It's a really interesting corner evaluation for Brown, as he checks a ton of boxes. Coming out of high school in Mater Dei. If you've listened to me before, if you have any idea about football in general, you've heard of Mater Dei. You already know what that means. That's one of the premier high school programs in the country. National schedule, future Power 4 talent everywhere on the field. And the pressure is real for that high school team. And Brown wasn't just another good player in that environment. He's one of the best cornerback recruits in 2024. Top 5 corner nationally. Chose Alabama over USC, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. I think he had over 50 offers. Heavyweight recruitment. The entire country saw the talent. Alabama, he signed with Nick Saban as part of his final recruiting class. Arrived in Alabama one day before Saban retired. And that's when everything at that program changed. A lot of players left. The roster shifted. The standard remained high, but the environment changed quickly. But Brown decided to stay in Tuscaloosa. Not only did he stay, he stepped right into the starting lineup in the first spring practice. And that matters. Corner's not an easy position to play, especially at Bama. The receivers you face in practice are different. The standard for defensive backs is different. And Brown playing immediately says a lot about his talent. As a freshman in 2024, started 13 games. 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. One of those fumble recoveries he took for 68 yards for a touchdown. Got freshman All-SEC honors. Had a great immediate season impact as a freshman. He was making plays, he was finding the football, and he was affecting games. As a sophomore in 2025, Brown kept building. 39 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 6 pass breakups, a forced fumble, 2 interceptions returned for touchdowns. One of those being a 99-yard pick 6, which was the second longest interception in Alabama program history. That's not just an interception. That is a game-changing swing of a play. It is. He also became the first Alabama corner to return 2 interceptions for touchdowns since Antonio Lagham in 1992. Think about all the Alabama corners that have been there. He's the first one since 1992 to do it twice in the same season. That says something. First thing that jumps off the page for him is the speed. He's got rare speed, shows up in recovery, shows up in vertical, shows up when he has to carry routes down the field, shows up when he drives on the football. That 99-yard pick 6 showed his athletic play. You have to finish that. You have to run away. You have to turn a defensive win into points. Brown can do that. Speed gives him margin for error. If he's a little late, he can still recover. And that's big, especially as he moves into the NFL. Second thing that shines for him is his man coverage. He's sticky in man coverage. He has the burst to match releases off the line. He can carry vertical routes, and he's quick enough to stay attached early in the route. And it's a good foundation. Cornerbacks who can play man coverage, always going to have value. Always. Especially if they have the speed that Brown has. He's not a finished lockdown corner yet, but the traits are there. He just needs more coaching. He needs more development. Um, Third, he is decent in the run game. He's physical and willing to come up and hit somebody, and that matters because you want a corner that is part of the run game. They cover, they chase, if they avoid contact, they then they're missing out on a phase of the game. And Brown is not that. He's willing to come up and support in the run. He can tackle, he can support in the run, and he can get involved. And that matters when you're projecting him to the NFL. Another thing talking about tackling, he's a reliable tackler. 5 missed tackles across 764 snaps. That's a small number for those not mathematically inclined. Cornerback tackling doesn't have to be at the linebacker level, but it has to be dependable because you're at the edge. You have to be able to stop them. 5 missed tackles across 764 snaps. That's availability first off. That's stamina second off. That's toughness, and that shows that you can play a real role. When you put the piece together, this profile is fairly easy. Speed, man coverage, run support, tackling, ball production, experience, the Alabama pedigree. It's a strong cornerback resume. He's not a one-trick player. He's not just a track athlete, but nobody's perfect. He does need to improve on some things. First concern is the yardage he's allowed. He surrendered 361 yards last year. It's not a disaster, but for a corner ranked this high, there are reps to tighten up. And while the splash production is great, while the pick sixes are amazing, the speed is great, your down-to-down coverage still has to get cleaner. Great corners are not just remembered for the plays they make. They're trusted because they erase opportunities. And Brown is good in coverage, but if he wants to climb higher, he has to be dominant. And that's part of the grander concern with him is that his coverage grade is just good. It's not elite. When you rank a corner inside the top 50, you're not just looking for a playmaker. You're looking for a player who can cover NFL receivers snap after snap. Brown has the tools there, but the technique is not polished. It's very rough technique. And that's the difference between cornerback 9 and cornerback 5 or cornerback 4. The upside's there. The results are good, but the consistency still needs to grow. The third thing is he does get grabby at the top of routes. When Brown's recovery is late, he gets handsy, and something NFL teams are going to watch closely. College officials may let some contact go, but NFL receivers are going to sell it. NFL officials will call it. And NFL quarterbacks will force corners into those situations. And if you get known as a guy who's a free 15 for pass interference, that's a hard thing to come back from. And that's why he's quarterback 9. Quarterback class is deep. And Brown is right there at the edge of the highest tier. Players above him have cleaner coverage profiles, better length, more refined technique, or more dominant down-to-down tape right now. But Brown absolutely belongs in the conversation because of his speed, because of his ability to play man, because he has those splash play productions and are able to return for touchdowns. He's willing to tackle. He's willing to be in there. But even though the foundation is extremely strong, he's still a player with real first round, and he's still a player with real first round upside. The technique needs to take another step. He's 2026 is a season about polishing for him. We already have the experience. We know the splash play and the physical tools. You come from Alabama, so you're already going to get that on your resume ticked off. I need to see cleaner coverage. I need to see fewer grabs. I need to see fewer lapses. I need to see tighter route transitions, better discipline at the top of routes, and more consistent down-to-down coverage. I also need to see if you can play in a zone, man, because right now you've been strictly man-to-man, and I need to see some versatility. Um, I don't want to say strictly man-to-man. It's not been strictly man-to-man. It's been dominant man-to-man. Let me rephrase that. Um, if he can show some of those things, he's going to rise. He has the ability to rise. Um, a corner who can run and cover, tackle, take the ball away, and plays in the SEC and Alabama and at Alabama, you're gonna get seen, man. Like there is no way for you to hide. What's missing is the coverage profile because it needs to polish, and you have 2026 to prove it. Can he climb? Absolutely, he can climb. But the technique needs to clean up. You know, he has everything else. The technique just needs to clean up. He has the speed, the toughness, the ball production. The starting experience at Alabama alone is going to help him. He's run support, heavy snap load. It's just about refinement for him moving into this season. If he can become more consistent at covering and cuts out the grabbing, he can climb into the top 5 corners on this board. I fully believe he can get into the top 5. Because when the player has this kind of speed and toughness combination, the ceiling is very, very high for him. Currently, he's an 8.96 out of 10, making him my number 50 prospect overall and the cornerback number 9 going into the season. He's fast, physical, battle-tested, great man coverage traits, real ball production, reliable tackling, and he's able to play all 3 phases of the game. He started every game as a freshman. He created takeaways immediately. Playing 764 snaps without wearing down is impressive unto itself. The concerns are real, but they're fixable. The coverage is good, not elite. Giving up 361 yards is not great. And grabbing at the top of routes to recover needs to be fixed. But it doesn't break the profile. It just gives him something to show us this season. That's my board, though. What do you think about Zabien Brown? Is he underrated at cornerback 9? Can he become Alabama's next first-round corner? Where would you rank him in the cornerbacks? Where would you rank him in the defensive backs overall? Drop your comments down below. Let's have a discussion. If you like the player profiles that we've been doing, they're based off film and analytics, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. So we're going to keep putting in the work. We're at 50 right now. Our goal is to be over 100 by the time college football kicks off. As always, I'm Draft Yoda, Bill Workman, your favorite draft nerd's favorite draft nerd, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.